It's Miss Ballou again, and we're going to continue on with our Titanic little 3-day workshop here. And if you'll notice on the front page, make sure you have a pencil in your hand. On the front page, you kind of cut off the title of this story, which is Lawrence Beasley's story. So there was no place to put your name. So look down here at the very bottom. At the very bottom, print your first and last name right now. Print your first and last name, and where it says grade, put your grade, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Okay, do that please, right now. Okay, what we're going to do today is I'm going to read you 3 short biographical, which means it's a story about a person that somebody else wrote, about 3 people that were actually on the Titanic. Okay, let's start with the first one. His name is Lawrence Beasley. Let's look at his story. Lawrence Beasley hadn't seen his brother Frank in ages, and he was looking forward to reconnecting. His second-class ticket would carry him as far as New York, and then he would travel to Toronto, where Frank lived. The ticket was for a ship called the Titanic, and it cost him 13 pounds or 21 US dollars, which was a significant amount of money for a 34-year-old science teacher. But a trip on the extravagant new ship would be worth it. A few nights into the voyage, Lawrence borrowed a book from the ship's library. He was reading on his bed when he felt the engines heave and then grow quiet. He opened his cabin door and asked the passing steward what had happened. He was assured that nothing was the matter, but Lawrence decided to check for himself. Up on the A deck, which was the very top deck, women and children were being loaded onto lifeboats. Lawrence took the stairs toward his cabin, and the stairs began to feel peculiar under his feet. The ship was tilting. He grabbed his coat and traveled back up to the A deck, where some men were now allowed to board lifeboat number 13. Lawrence scanned the boat. There were already 50, maybe 60 passengers aboard. He leapt and landed among the others, just as the ropes were lowering the boat. As they were descending, they came directly in the path of a pipe that was discharging water from the ship at an alarming rate. Lifeboat 13 would be flooded. Lawrence and the others screamed to get the attention of those above. Their course, meaning the course of the boat, or the lifeboat, was corrected, and after a few minutes, they finally reached the ocean. Now the men had difficulty cutting the ropes that connected them to Titanic. Lifeboat 15 was about to be dropped on top of them. Luckily, their screams were heard again, and Lifeboat 15 was held up until they could row away from the great ship, which only days ago had been called unsinkable. So he was one of the very lucky ones. Okay, turn the page. This is Jack Thayer's story. John B. Thayer, called Jack by his friends and family, was aboard the Titanic with his mother and father, sailing back home to the United States. The 17-year-old was one of the few people who went down with the ship and lived to tell about it. Remember, I think they said there were only 7. With his parents asleep in the adjoining cabin, Jack Thayer relaxed on his bunk. It was 11:45 p.m. and he was a first-class passenger aboard the spectacular Titanic. With his porthole, which is like a little window, a round window, ajar, Jack felt a breeze and detected a slight sway of the vessel. The ship's engines then shut down abruptly, and all was eerily quiet. Jack heard footsteps pounding the passageway. He threw a coat over his pajamas and went to investigate the commotion. Jack dashed up to the A deck on the port side, but didn't see anything unusual, so he maneuvered toward the bow. His eyes were still adjusting to the darkness. Jack swore he could glimpse chunks of ice. He hurried to retrieve his mother and father from their compartment, and they returned to survey the starboard side of the A deck. His father spotted ice, and they crossed to the port side, where they felt the entire ship tilt toward the ocean. They immediately sprinted back to their stateroom to dress. Jack put on an extra mohair vest along with his life preserver and overcoat. They arrived on deck just as instructions were issued for the women and children to evacuate. Jack said goodbye to his mother as he and his father proceeded through the crowds. They became separated. Jack located a friend, Milton, and the two considered their options. Hordes of passengers swamped the lifeboats, making them impossible to reach. They watched as men plunged into the ocean, but Milton resisted. He was not confident in his swimming abilities. The two young men stood on the rails of the ship. Jack encouraged Milton to jump, insisting he would go right after Milton. Jack saw Milton slide down the side of the ship into the water. He never saw Milton again. As the ship began to sink more rapidly, Jack jumped feet first into the icy water. The shock of the cold snatched his breath away. Around him, enormous pieces of the ship crashed into the water. The suction pulled him under, and he struggled to resurface. A wave pushed him farther from the wreckage. He reached out and felt something, an overturned lifeboat. A hand extended and hauled him from the ocean. Jack Thayer would remain perched atop the lifeboat, cramped between dozens of men, freezing in the night air, until a rescue ship arrived several hours later. Finally, aboard the rescue ship, Carpathia, Jack was reunited with his mother. His father did not survive. Okay, turn the page. Okay, this story is called Margaret Brown's story. Margaret Brown was happy to be visiting France. She had been busy in America raising money for her community to build churches and hospitals. She also gave countless speeches about the importance of a woman's right to vote. Margaret, 47, planned to recuperate in France and spend time with her daughter who attended college in Paris. There were so many landmarks to see. A few days after arriving, however, Margaret received word that her first grandson had taken ill. She was disappointed to cut her trip short, but she had to return to the U.S. quickly. She booked passage on the first ship to New York, which departed on April 10, 1912. The ship's name was the Titanic. Margaret attempted to enjoy the amazing vessel. The Titanic was the largest, most luxurious ship to ever set sail. There were many fancy galas, which were parties, live music, and gourmet meals, but her thoughts were elsewhere. A few nights into the trip, Margaret laid awake thinking about her grandson when she heard a noise. Outside of her cabin, a commotion of people came rushing by, trying to make their way to the lifeboats. The ship was sinking, and there didn't seem to be enough lifeboats. Margaret couldn't think about herself. She stood on the deck and guided the other women and children onto the lifeboats first. Her ears filled with screams as the ship began to tilt toward the ocean. Still, Margaret reached out to help more people. Eventually, she was forced onto a lifeboat just as it was released into the blackness. Margaret gazed at the scared faces around her. She comforted the women and children. Then she grabbed an oar and led the others in rowing. Finally, she saw a light in the distance, a rescue ship. Margaret stayed with the survivors until they docked in New York and were reunited with family and friends. The newspaper reporters wanted to interview Margaret. When they heard about her brave deeds on board the Titanic, they nicknamed her the unsinkable Molly Brown. Margaret thought it was a bit silly. She was only doing the same thing she did every day, caring for people and helping others in need. Okay, let's turn to the next page. This next page is just comprehension questions, multiple choice. So you can go through those and use your packet to help you find the answers, the packet from Wednesday. Okay, now turn the page and then turn this sideways. And let's follow along and see how this works. Comparing multiple accounts. Be sure you put your first and last name and your grade on this one and on the questions so I'll know whose paper it is. Okay, it says, use the survivor's story to complete the table. If the information needed is not provided, write not given. So go across. Age at the time of the Titanic's sailing. If it tells how old Lawrence Beasley is, put his age. If it does not, put not given right up here in the instructions. Margaret Brown, I think they actually said she was 47, so you could put 47 right there. Jack Thayer, I think they said he was 17. Let me look back and see if they said how old Mr. Beasley was. Oh, he was, I think he was 34. Yes, Mr. Lawrence Beasley was 34, Margaret Brown was 47, and Jack Thayer was 17. But if we didn't know or they didn't tell the age, then just put not given. Go straight across. Family or friends traveling with them. Did Lawrence Beasley have anybody traveling with him? No. So just put none or no. Did Margaret Brown have any family or friends traveling with her? No. Did Jack Thayer? Yes, his mom and dad. Okay? That's how you do that one. Do the same thing on the second page. There's more questions and just go straight across. If the answer is not given in these 3 stories that we just read, then put not given. Okay? It's that simple. I hope you've enjoyed this little short part about the Titanic. I find it very fascinating. I'm sure many of you, or maybe all of you, have seen the movie Titanic. I've seen it once because that's all I could get through because it makes me cry so much. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope to see you soon, and take care of each other. Enjoy your weekend, and be safe, be kind, and I love you. Bye-bye.